Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you for joining us on GB News Day. Rishi Sunak had planned a rise in corporation tax. Liz Truss cancelled it. Will that definitely remain cancelled? It definitely, corporation tax is not going to rise.
Well, not having the rise is extremely good policy. Bear in mind that cutting corporation tax from 28% down to 19% led to about a 50% increase in corporation tax revenues and an increase in corporation tax as a percentage of GDP. So it actually provided more money to HMRC to pay for the public services that we need. So it's a policy that is beneficial for everybody. It's better for businesses and it's better for the Treasury.
Secretary of State, can I pin you down on this issue of the blame game? As I was just discussing there with Liam, the chief UK economist at Deutsche Bank, Sanjay Raja, told the Treasury Select Committee that the unfunded tax cuts were the straw that broke the camel's back. Do you accept that?
Well, I think the context that puts it into does begin to realise that the tax changes are relatively small in the context of the whole thing, that they're about 2% of GDP, and that what I was saying this morning was not a criticism of the Bank of England, but merely a recognition of economic reality, that whenever the US Federal Reserve raises rates, countries that are not raising rates as quickly will see their currencies decline in relation to the dollar. And that always happens. That isn't surprising. It's not a criticism. It recognises different economic realities in different countries, but that is what you would expect to happen. So I'm not sure straws and camels' backs is a useful or helpful cliche in these contexts. But what I would say is that the cut in taxation was not that big.
Why didn't the government accept the OBR's offer of actually running its slide rule over the suggestions made in the mini-budget about the tax cuts and so on? If you were so confident that that was going to be OK, why didn't the OBR get the chance to go public with it?
Well, the OBR has a statutory duty to fulfil, which it will fulfil. But the ABR is run by good people. I thought Robert Choate, when he ran it, was a particularly capable economist. But even Robert, when he was running it, didn't get the forecasts right. So the idea that the ABR will actually make a forecast that turns out to be what happens isn't actually the case. It makes estimates which are well thought through and made by clever people, but economic forecasting is never that accurate.
OK. Well, politics is a complicated game too, isn't it, Business Secretary? Your colleague, the former Tory Chief Whip, warned against balancing the budget on the back of the poorest people in our country. Benefits must rise in line with prices, mustn't they?
But we haven't yet got the inflation figure on which benefits will be based. So the figure comes out in a day or two. It's always in the middle of the month following. Benefits every year are uprated in relation to what has happened in September. Some benefits are raised in line with inflation by statute. Some are raised in accordance with different principles. But no decision has been made on how benefits will be uprated. So we shouldn't jump the gun on these issues.
Now, you have indicated that perhaps the bank should have raised its rates by 0.75% instead of the 0.5% to match the United States. You obviously believe the bank should be independent, but what do you think should be happening now November the 3rd for the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting?
No, I haven't indicated that the bank should have increased interest rates by more. What I have commented on is the inevitable effect of the interest rate differential between the UK and the Federal Reserve, because I greatly respect Bank of England independence, and I think when you're talking about the stability of the system, this requires the independence to be maintained by government ministers. So I wouldn't dream of giving advice to the bank on what it should do.
OK, but let me put this to you. It would be politically inconvenient for this government if the Bank of England decides to really start ramping up rates now to choke off inflation.
The Bank of England is independent, and other central banks have gone at different rates from the UK central bank, some faster, some slower, and the Bank of England must try and calculate what is the right pace to go for the UK economy. But you have to bear in mind that the way to stop inflation is through monetary policy. Everybody knows that. That is an interest rate tool that the Bank of England is in control of, and that is the mechanism that will be used to tackle inflation and already has been used. But that's done independently and is a consequence of ordinary policy making.
OK, let me put to you the words of Kevin Holland-Rake, again, one of your members of Parliament, a Conservative member of Parliament, a member of the Treasury Select Committee. He says it would be better for Kwasi Kwarteng to U-turn on some elements of that so-called mini-budget than to spur on further market turmoil by pushing ahead regardless. Is everything in that budget, we know 45p has gone, is everything else that was introduced in that mini-budget, is it sort of there in stone, set in stone?
Well, we passed into law through its House of Commons stages the national insurance reduction yesterday, and the Socialists, the Labour Party, agreed with it. So things are already happening and are being pushed through.
Can I just return to that phrase used, the consequences of ordinary policy making? Clearly, if interest rates keep climbing and people are hurting, there may even be a housing crash, some have suggested, you're effectively voting yourselves out of power at the next general election, aren't you?
Well, you're making the case very eloquently for the fiscal policies of Kwasi Kwarteng, because what you have to do in response to the monetary tightening is have some element of fiscal loosening, which is what has been happening in other countries as well, because monetary tightening is difficult for an economy. It puts interest rates up, that puts the cost of mortgages and other borrowing up. That is hard for people, for families and for businesses. So having some amelioration on the fiscal side is getting the balance right.